G'day, I'm Scott Poynton and welcome to another Scott Poynton podcast. And today I have the really great pleasure of talking to a very good friend of mine, Michael Fischer. And Michael works for the Movember Foundation. And we'll get him to explain what Movember is. It's a fantastic idea, a fantastic organisation that works on men's health. But he's the country manager for Europe, or mainland Europe. And good morning, Michael. How are you, mate?
Hey, I'm good, mate. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And in the spirit of keeping up with men's health, which is what Movember's all about, you just mentioned that you've been for a 5-kilometre run and you're very sweaty.
Yeah, it's super warm in London right now. There's a bit of a heat wave going on. And living in England, obviously people talk about the weather a lot, if it's too warm, if it's too cold. But yeah, it's just been very hot for a few days. So working out is a bit of a challenge. So I try to go and work out in the morning when it's a bit colder before it gets too hot.
Good man. Now, look, tell us a bit about you, Michael. We'll come on to Movember in a minute, but tell us about Michael Fischer.
Yeah, well, Michael Fischer is 36 years old, turning 37 in a month. I am born and raised in Berlin, Germany, and I lived there pretty much all of my life until 5 years ago when I moved to London. For my job at Movember. But yeah, I grew up in East Berlin. So actually, I was born before the wall came down. So I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, moved around Berlin quite a lot. Went to school there, studied there, and then started my professional career in a PR and marketing agency. And Movember became one of my clients, and I somehow did a good job. So they poached me and asked me if I wanted to work on their side, and also if I wanted to move to London, which was a different London than it is today, both politically, but also the COVID situation obviously has changed the city quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. And look, I know you've done a great job at Movember. I have the pleasure. I'm in Switzerland, and you've kindly invited me to be the community ambassador, one of the community ambassadors here in Switzerland for Movember. And it's been my great pleasure to work with you, which is why I thought we'd do a quick podcast today, because I know that, well, Movember's all about change, but you do a lot of work there in Movember to bring change as well. So tell us about Movember, mate. Changing the face of men's health. So, for the idea of change, Movember seems to be... that's its core business, bringing change. So tell us about Movember.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for being such an integral part of the campaign. And we're quite big when it comes to the money we raise and invest, but we're quite small when it comes to our staff. And we are financed by donations, and we're also running a campaign on the shoulders of the people who support us. We call them Mo Bros or Mo Sisters for the ladies who support us as well, and they are essential for our campaign, because we need people like you on the ground who have a connection to our cause and who pretty much are walking, talking billboards of men's health, whether that's by growing a mustache for the guys or taking up a physical challenge maybe for the ladies, whether that's hiking up a mountain. Like you've done in the past, or just organizing a fundraiser, a get together, a bake sale, a pub quiz, anything to get men involved a bit more with their health and to get them talking is crucial to our campaign. And Movember is about change. We've changed quite a lot over the years. I've been involved since 2012, and looking at the organization today, it's very different to what it's been. Maybe in its early days, when it was founded in a pub in Fitzroy in Melbourne, when there was just a few guys who were talking about fashion trends, and they realized that trends disappear and then they reappear, and they challenged each other in a bit of a brainstorm to find a trend that never made a comeback. And then they realized mustaches were around pretty much until the mid-80s, and then weirdly disappeared. And early in the 2000s, if you can remember,
probably a good thing,
was clean shaven. So they dared each other to bring the mustache back by growing it in the following month, which was November, and then Mo mustache. In short, in Australian slang, they called the November Movember. And they realized two things. One is that a lot of people asked them what the heck they were doing. And especially the men were intrigued to find out if they could join the year after. So they realized that they were onto something, and then took a quick look at what women were doing for breast cancer awareness, having their own month in October, having like a ribbon, like a pink ribbon, as their sign. And then they thought, well, why don't we combine the two and start raising money for men's health? And there's a few causes that we've picked up over the years: prostate cancer, which mostly affects older men; testicular cancer, which affects younger men; and then men's mental health and suicide prevention, which sadly affects men of all ages. And I thought, the easiest thing that everyone can do is just have a conversation, check in on each other. And we've grown. We've invested in over 1,250 projects, which is great. But I think the first step for everyone to get involved is just to inform themselves on our website, Movember.com, and to also have a little check-in with oneself. Is there something that you can do? And also reach out to the men in your life, whether you're a man or woman, and just make sure that they are aware of the health risks they're facing and what they can do to live healthier, happier, and longer lives.
Yeah, well, that's a great ambition from Movember Foundation, and that was 2003 when it started, Michael, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a long time ago, and raising something in the area of around $50 million a year, I think, for these men's health issues, prostate, testicular cancer, and men's mental health and suicide prevention, going to lots of programs all around the world, doing lots of great things. And it is change. And the strapline for Movember is changing the face of men's health. And so I'm interested to learn about your work, mate. Now, so we know that the big countries for Movember are Australia, where it started, the UK, where you're based, the US and Canada. But around the world, there's loads of countries that get involved as well, and in their own small ways, and sometimes a bit bigger ways. And you manage the whole of Europe. And I know from our talks and our work together that you visit lots of companies. They get interested in the idea of supporting Movember, but you've still got to get them over a hurdle. You've sometimes got to get them through the idea. Share the idea with them. You're there as a change maker. You're trying to bring change to the way they perhaps spend their marketing and promotional dollars, but also to inspire the people who work for the companies to do more around these issues. So I'm just intrigued, mate, about how you go about that, because you often come in cold. People have heard about Movember, they don't really know about it. What's your approach to bringing people into the Movember family and getting them inspired to get involved? And then later, let's talk about some roadblocks you hit along the way and how you navigate your way through those.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And just a quick update on the numbers. I think last year we raised over 100 million Aussie dollars.
Wow!
It's always hard to convert that into US or other dollars, but yeah, it's quite a big effort. And the other question is about getting people involved. And I've seen over the years that a lot of companies, a lot of corporates, also like suit and tie companies have picked up Movember, because for them it's an easy way to tackle a few challenges that they're facing. And this is also the way I approach them. I try not to get them to have to do extra work, but I'm meeting them halfway, and I'm trying to help them with their existing challenges, and maybe using Movember as a bit of a tool to overcome those challenges. And the main ones we've identified that a lot of companies are facing these days are obviously employee health, with a lot of employers struggling to get, especially the men in the company, to look after themselves. And there's some amazing initiatives from companies, whether that's being able to work flexibly, being able to take time out during the day to exercise, but still a lot of men are struggling, especially with what's expected of them, maybe as a manager, maybe the amount of hours they need to put into work, and still finding the time to check in with themselves. And I think Movember is a nice positive reminder, not just in the month of November, but obviously with a focus on that month, for them to check in with themselves and take that time out of the day, maybe Movember gives them an opportunity to to kind of not just check in with themselves, but also with their co-workers. And the second one is team building, which I think is really important, especially in these days where a lot of people are working remotely and maybe they feel a bit disconnected. And we've heard so many stories from all over the world of companies who have really embraced Movember and not just, growing a mustache, which obviously not everyone can do, but, using Movember as an opportunity to get people together, whether that's for an apéro or after work drinks, maybe on a Friday, whether that's for a lunch and learn, that we help organize, or we introduce people to Movember and talk a bit about our work and our course areas. And we have had a video a couple of years ago called The Nod, where, it's just random men walking down the street, and if they see another guy sporting a mustache, they give him a nod, and it creates a sense of belonging and of community. And we're a community of over 6 million people who have joined the course over the year, and there's people like you who've been around for ages, and there's people who maybe have never done it or never heard of it, and it's nice to have that connection between those people. And the third one is employer branding. And I've realized recently a lot of quite conservative suit and tie consultancies put out ads showing, young, hip-looking females and guys who, don't dress according to the dress code, and telling people, come to our firm, you can express your individuality here, and you can be the best you can be, and we're changing the world together. And I think this is also something that we can offer companies, being part of this movement, making the world a better place, one mustache or one move or one event at a time. So it gives companies an opportunity to stand out in the competition, because it's harder these days to recruit the best talent just by telling them, here's your salary, this is the perks you get from working at our company. So we can help those companies tell their story maybe in a slightly different way. And we've created a platform called the Movember Business Club, where we invite companies to take part in, and where they can also compete with other corporates in their country, and help them tell the story about how they support men's health and how they help to change the face of men's health, both within the company, but also talking about it externally.
Sounds pretty good and pretty comprehensive. I mean, you're offering companies, quite a lot of, I wouldn't call them services, they're not services, but opportunities there to really bind their team together and portray themselves in a really positive way. Along the way, they raise money, the money goes to a good cause. Yeah. But it's not always smooth sailing, is it? I mean, when I think of Movember, I'm thinking, well, why isn't everyone involved in Movember? It really speaks to me. But of course, there are other causes out there. There are many causes in the world that people could engage in, could support, and so part of your job is to convince folk of the merits of getting involved in Movember. And of course, this is not to in any way prioritise Movember over, for example, as you mentioned, breast cancer and things like this. There's lots of really important causes out there, but there's only a certain amount of companies, there's only a certain amount of time, only a certain amount of dollars that can be shared with causes. When you go in to see a company and they're interested, you're not going in because you've never heard from them before. You don't just knock on a company's door and walk in off the street. Yeah. So they've identified an interest and you go over there to speak to them. What are some of the things you encounter, mate? And I'm imagining that you can sometimes go into a room where you've got a cross section of people present. Maybe there's some internal division around where support should go. So you might be in a room with 5 people and 3 of them think this is really great, and 2 of them think this is the worst idea they've ever encountered, and somehow you're confronted with even internal politics on display, where some people are like sitting there with their arms crossed. I don't want to talk to this bloke. We don't want to know about Movember, but maybe the CEO is passionate about it, and they're having to go along. Just talk us through some of those situations that you find yourself in, and how you navigate your way through.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because a lot of my work is, keeping tabs on people and just being persistent. The way we approach things in Europe, and other markets do it differently. They do a lot more cold approaches, but we try to avoid them, because it always feels a bit weird to try to get a foot in the door. And also in Europe, we've got a very small team, so we need to be very mindful on how we invest our time. And time is a limited resource. The good thing about Movember is I can tell you exactly when Movember starts next year and the year after, because we've got this 1 month. So that already helps, because there's only 12 months in a year, and we kind of own one of them, which means it's easy for companies to plan their year, because we've got this fixed date. But then also this creates a lot of issues with planning and just managing all the work before the month kicks in. But a lot of the conversations I'm having are with people who have already done Movember. So we kind of approach them and ask them to introduce us to either the marketing or the HR or CSR department. So we kind of use them a bit as a Trojan horse to help us identify the key people. But we obviously also use all the other tools available if you want to make a sale out there, whether that's Salesforce, where we keep our contacts and identify those people working in those companies, or whether that's LinkedIn, which helps us to identify the key people in the organization, so we can ask our community the favor to introduce us. You've mentioned CEOs. They're really, really important as well. So once we've identified the key people and they say that they're keen to support us, we also ask them to aim high and get the senior leadership involved, because we've had cases, for example, with KPMG over here in the UK, where one of the partners has been a very active and supportive Mobro, and this has opened up so many doors, both in that company, but it's also a great example for other corporates to see that you can be a senior leader, and you can have a mustache, and you can be a spokesperson without losing any of your authority. Quite the other way around. It makes the team, I think, see you as a more approachable leader. And I think leading with empathy is probably a topic for another podcast. But I think if you, as a leader, as a manager, show some vulnerability, it really opens up a whole level of relationship with your team, and being vulnerable invites them to be more open about their issues, and it really creates a deeper relationship,
deeper connection. It's about culture, isn't it, mate? It becomes part of the culture of the organization.
Yeah, and then as you just asked, what happens when you sit in that meeting? A lot of the times I'm in that meeting, and I will ask a lot of questions, and I will try to figure out, as I mentioned earlier, like, what are the challenges this company has. And there's been a few meetings lately where I've had an open conversation with potential partners or with potential companies, and they've told me, well, we're already ticking all of those boxes, and we're quite comfortable, and we've got our 3-4 charities we work with this year, and there's just not enough space to work with you. And then I get the message, and I'd ask them if they'd be keen to review that next year. And then, I put them on my to-do list for January 2021 or December this year, and check in with them again. But what's really opened up a lot of doors this year is mental health, because we've started a very quickly turned around campaign around COVID and physical distancing. We try to avoid social distancing because we want people to stay socially connected in lockdown and in isolation. And we've started a small campaign just to guide and help our community through this harsh times. It's not been as difficult as it was in some markets, in all of our markets. But for example, I look after Spain, which has been hit really hard. Obviously, the UK, our biggest market in Europe, has been hit really, really hard. And we try to help all of those communities through COVID. And we've launched a tool called Movember Conversations that is available and free for everyone to use, which is kind of a virtual role play where you can learn a few phrases and things you can do in a conversation when you realize a mate is going through a tough time. And we've we've been very upfront with what we had to offer around the mental health space, and this has really helped to sell Movember to a few companies, because they've been struggling to educate their staff around that, because it's still such a taboo topic, especially for men, to talk about emotions and feelings and mental health. And in this last half year, I think a lot of people have realized how important it is, and that it's not a problem that will go away if you ignore it, but you have to tackle it head on. And we try to intervene very early. So we're not a crisis helpline. There's a lot of amazing organizations out there that do an amazing job helping people who are in immediate crisis, but we try to intervene very, very early. So having an open conversation about mental health, having an open conversation about good mental health is very important, and checking in with friends and colleagues and family before it turns into something more serious is something we advocate for. And that works really well with companies who are more open-minded these days to talk about mental health in the workplace as well, because in the end it's a financial issue, because people who struggle with mental health and still work are less productive, and if it turns into a more serious issue and they're out of a job for weeks or even months, obviously this is something we can tackle very early.
I mean, COVID has brought us, as you say, it's brought these issues very sharply into focus, and a lot of people are struggling, and obviously not just men, but a lot of people struggling working from home, where they've got childcare now and they're having to do schooling. So the pressures on people have really ratcheted up. And so in terms of that sense, I guess your persistence shines through in terms of bringing people on board, and just the nature of your program. So I guess in mindful of this idea of this theme of how to bring change, is making sure that your programs are really relevant to the context in which you're working. Sounds like a pretty important aspect of what you guys are doing, and that you're alive to the changes in that context. I remember in, I think it was 2015, that Movember first really dived into the whole idea of mental health, because up until that stage the focus had been on prostate and testicular cancer. I think the mental health issues were present, but it wasn't such a major focus of the foundation's work. And it just seemed to be so timely to me as a Mobro, and just broadened out the message. And it made you, I think, so much more relevant to the broader society, because it's such a huge issue. And, we haven't mentioned, but we should, that 3/4 of suicides in the world involve men, and this is an absolute bizarre statistic. It's a tragedy, and this is one of the key areas that Movember is working on. So I think you're doing great work, Michael. Very passionate about supporting you, but just
thank you.
Just give us that, if you can, just one example as we draw to a close, about a situation you found yourself in that, I'm really interested in stressful situations, where, and you're such a calm person. I think we can hear that by the way you approach things. And I think that's a key element in your work as well. I don't think I've ever seen you, we might have had private calls where we both expressed a bit of frustration, but in the moment when you're facing people, my sense is this great ability you have to be calm in the storm can really help you inspire people to come on board, to open them up to broader thinking. As you say, you've got companies say, well, we don't really want to work with you. We've got our 4 charities. Okay, well, can we talk about that next year? I like that persistence, but I think that calmness that you bring really is such a key ingredient of your success in growing the European program. And I'd like you to just talk about that. And if you can give me an example of a situation where you're in a meeting where things were going off a bit, and people were a bit cranky, and you were able to navigate your way through and bring out a great conclusion, because I'm really interested in that sense of change. How do you get people from going in one direction to going in completely the 180-degree opposite direction?
Yeah, thanks. That I'm very humbled by your remarks. That sounds good, and that's maybe not how I always feel in that situation.
Well, hold on. Let's just touch on that. That's a great point. And one of the things that I try and that's clear to me, and through my own work with change making, is that you can be in an absolute storm, and inside you're feeling it very strongly, and it's like, God, you're stressed, you're nervous, you're having a lot of your own internal turmoil. but externally presenting this image of calm, reason, logic.
Yeah.
My experience is it gets you through. But just talk about those inner feelings, Michael, that, when you're sitting in those storms, as you say, you don't always feel great. You don't always feel in control of the situation. Mostly we're never in control of these meetings, but we're a part of them. I'm just fascinated in that what you just mentioned there about not always feeling calm. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's something I had to learn. I had to learn growing up. Like, I remember when I was a kid in school or at home doing my homework, there were situations where I was so angry at this situation, like I would break a pencil or throw something through the room, and I would always feel silly afterwards and be like, well, this didn't really help. It felt good in the moment, but throwing a tantrum, immediately afterwards you just feel stupid for having done that. So I don't know, I kind of learned those techniques and taught them myself. But then, starting my professional career in the agency, you can't do that anymore. You have to be professional. And you look around and you look at other people, and I've had amazing managers, especially in my early days, who would give me a lot of leeway and who would allow me to try things out, who would trust me and who would support me even through failure, and would always say, we all make mistakes. Let's try to learn from them. And this has been a valuable lesson for me, just to explore that, and also to figure out what we can do in those situations. And they help me a lot. Also meetings, and one of the key things I think in those meetings when you're really frustrated, and I'm a very positive thinker, so I don't find it hard to find the little speck of gold in a big pile of rubble. But one of the things when you sit in the meeting, and I've been in one of those meetings in the past, actually in Switzerland, where I felt a lot of rejection, and there were a lot of people in the room who didn't get the idea of Movember and who didn't want to get involved. But there was one person in the room that actually invited everybody else to the meeting. This was a company that we've already successfully implemented a Movember campaign with, a very, conservative international bank, and they've invited other corporates that they thought might be interested in Movember. And there was one woman in the room who worked for a big American company, and she had done Movember in the past. So the person that initially invited me went really quiet when the first objections came up, and I tried to make eye contact and get her on board as an ally. And it didn't work. And then I looked to the other woman who's just outed herself as a Movember supporter, and being American and very positive, she just pretty much took over that role of inspiring everybody else. And she was like, okay, I see that you are not in this, but I really think this could work, and I'm really positive. So finding and identifying that ally is really important. And there's a lot of literature out there when it comes to sales, all the kinds of different people you meet. And there's the mole who maybe doesn't really get you anywhere, but he will help you try to identify the person that you need to talk to. And then there's people who maybe say they really want to help you, but they only do it to save face, and they don't actually do it. So a lot of it is people skills, and it's even harder if you can't see, if you can't look the people in the eye, and if you can't really see them face to face, like in these days now. But yeah, that's really important. It's just trying to map out who you're dealing with, and learn as much as you can about that person, and really try to ask the right question to figure out where the objection comes from. And sometimes people say one thing, but they mean another thing. They will say, "Oh, we don't have time," and then you can ask them, "Okay, but what keeps you busy? What's something that if it weren't an issue would not stand in the way anymore, and can actually enable this?" And just have an open mind, find an ally, and then, as I said earlier, there's always a next year. I don't take rejection personally, and I had to learn this in my early agency days, where you thought you can't leave before your boss, and you need to put in the extra work although you don't get paid. And I still find myself in situations where I have to just get stuff done, but I always make sure I find time either in the day or after work to take my head off work, and not try not to take work out of the office and think about it too much, but really say, okay, the day's done. I'm going to close my laptop. I don't have any work notifications on my phone, so even if I get an email at 11 p.m. That should keep me worried, I don't look at it until the next morning. So having clear boundaries, I think, really helps you to to deal with those frustrations at work, so you don't take them into your personal life, but you leave them in the office.
Such an important point, Michael, and thanks for making it. It's one of the key things that I talk about with people when they're grappling. Sometimes people are really burnt out. They're throwing themselves, and it's often in companies that are, or let's say organisations that are dedicated to a cause. Yeah. Non-profits that are trying to bring change in complex situations. You've got people in there who so believe in what they're doing that they will work those long hours. They will exhaust themselves. And I've met so many people who are just so burnt out by the work. And you talk to them, and you say, what do you do to care for yourself? What do you do for self-care, to nourish yourself? And an extreme earlier in the year, I was talking to a wonderful woman in Australia, and she couldn't tell me. She was so exhausted and so burnt out that she just sort of stopped thinking about the things that nourish her. And then she thought about it and realised that, one of the reasons she lives where she was so that, it was a couple of miles from the beach and she could go for a walk, and she used to. But she hadn't done it for about 3 years. And so she started again, and this nourished her and gave her the ability to just disconnect from work. So I think, when you're in those stressful situations with work, you need to be strong, not just physically. You need to have good physical well-being, but good sort of spiritual and emotional well-being as well. That you're in a good place. So, and you've said so many really key things there. You don't take rejection personally, and that's really important, because if you do, you'll soon be in trouble, because there's a lot of rejection in the world, and it can just weigh you down. So I also love what you mentioned about the situation you were in with your early career, where you obviously had some great managers and mentors that could help you learn these things. But last question, mate. I'm just fascinated by the impact of childhood. It's a strange thing. I've written a book about my childhood, and you mentioned when you were a young lad and you were studying, and you get a bit fired up and things like that. But I'm just interested if you've thought about growing up in East Berlin. Obviously very different to growing up in Berlin today. You've obviously, the wall did come down and you had that freedom. Do you think some of that, and maybe you were too young, I don't know exactly when the wall came down, maybe you were too young to remember, but do you think some of that way of life has helped you be resilient in tough situations? Because I guess it wasn't an awful situation growing up in East Berlin, but it wasn't the beautiful free Berlin and other Western countries we think of today. So do you think that might have helped you build resilience?
Yeah, I was 6 years old when the wall came down, and my dad came home that morning or the morning after. He was out on the streets because he couldn't believe it until he saw it, and then when he saw it, he was so overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do with himself, and he was just lost in the moment. And he came home in the morning and told me about it, and I didn't really know what to say apart from I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you're happy.
You knew nothing about it, I guess.
Well, I had a very happy childhood, and I wasn't aware of politics. I was just 1 year away from getting into school, and the system in East Germany was that once you started school, that's when you started to get indoctrinated. Mm-hmm. They had this youth organization that was pretty much, it was called the Free German Youth. There wasn't a lot of freedom in it, but that's the beautiful thing about countries like your GDR, the German Democratic Republic. Just because it had democracy written in its name didn't mean it was actually a democratic state.
No.
And so years later, when I read 1984 by George Orwell, I finally understood what all of that means, and that the Ministry of Truth is doing exactly the opposite. Mm-hmm. Great book, by the way. No, so I didn't really know anything about that, but I asked a lot of questions growing up, and then I learned a lot about it in hindsight. So the day after the war came down, or 2 days later, my dad and I went to the western side of the Berlin Wall with all the graffitis all over it. And there's still specks of the Berlin Wall you can buy on some tourist hotspots in Berlin. And trust me, if you collected all of those specks of Berlin Wall and put them back together, I think you can build another 10 Berlin Walls with it.
The marketing lads have got involved, yeah.
Yeah, so many people were on the streets those days, and having a hammer and just hammering bits off the wall. And it's actually surprising when you go to Berlin these days. There's not a lot of wall left, because as you do after this horrible system or some horrible systems break down, you just want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, only to realize 20 years later that maybe you should have kept a few as a reminder, a few bits of the wall. But they're doing a good job these days, trying to rebuilding some of it and recreating it just to get people through the experience. So I didn't really see a lot of that. But yeah, as I said in the beginning, when you were born in a different country, in a different system, I think what it helped me with is just being open-minded about the different ways that people can grow up in. And another aspect of my life that taught me a lot that I haven't mentioned yet is when I was 18, I was conscripted to mandatory army service, which was 9 months at the time. It's been paused or abandoned by now. But this really taught me a lot, because the way it works in Germany, and I think it's the same in Switzerland and some other countries, is you pretty much get drafted, and then they send you somewhere a bit further away from where you live, and you get mixed with a bunch of people that you've never met before, and suddenly you're in this completely different world where a lot of the rules that you've grown up with don't apply anymore, and you have to adapt to them quickly. But you have to also develop some social skills, because suddenly you're not surrounded by people who all went to the same school or live in the same city or the same area. So I went to the highest tier of secondary school in Germany that would qualify you to go to uni. So I felt a bit, I felt like I was on a different trajectory to some other parts of the population, but then you're suddenly freezing your bum off in a ditch in some forest in Germany in winter at minus 20 degrees, and you're next to a builder who pretty much spent all of his life in a very different world, and you have to come to terms with that, and you have to find a commonality or some kind of common ground with other people. And it's a very humbling experience, because you realize that you can learn a lot from them, although at school you're taught that you're something better, and you realize you're actually not. So this really helped me to build a lot of social skills and maybe a bit of resilience, and just accepting some situations where you can't really change it, and having a bit of a stoic approach to that, and just accepting the things that you can't really change, but then trying to adapt your mindset to those situations, and as I said earlier, not take things too personal, but just understand where other people are coming from, understand that maybe they made decisions that led to them being this way that they didn't have a lot of influence on. I think that really shaped me, and I've learned a lot in those situations, and helped me moving to the UK, moving to London, which obviously is a very different culture and place to live, learning and speaking a different language. My wife's Australian, so there's another part of the world with a different culture. Although they kind of speak the same language, it's still a very different mentality, and a lot of experiences in my life have shaped me. And sometimes you don't realize that until 20 years later. You remember a situation that really taught you a lesson that you kind of picked up on later in your life.
That's fantastic, Michael. Thank you so much. And I'm glad you mentioned that army experience. These experiences really teach us a lot. I think I had a lot of work. I wasn't conscripted to the army myself, but I had a lot of work experience before I went to university that really opened my eyes and taught me a lot of humility and taught me a lot about accepting people.
Yeah,
Michael, we've come to an end, mate. I think we've got to finish up. But thank you so much for talking to me today and sharing some of these experiences and these insights about who you are, about the work you do, the great work that Movember does. We encourage. This is not an advertisement for Movember, this podcast, but really, it is something that Michael obviously is very passionate about, and so am I. So do visit the Movember website to learn about their work, and you'll see how they, as an organisation, bring lots of programs, lots of activities, really, really beautiful work, I think, to deliver against their goal of changing the face of men's health. And Michael, you're doing a great job. All the team at Movember, we're very grateful for them. And thanks again, mate, for being with us today.
No, thank you. And stay safe. And I'll see you very soon.
Good man. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye.